Well, good morning. Great to be together this morning. Great to see you. We are in part 4 of a series called All In, and we've been talking in this series about how to move from having a faith to living with faith. And if you haven't been with us, part of the conversation has been about the fact that those of us who would call ourselves followers of Jesus, there can be points in our lives where we start to feel like our spiritual life is stale. We can feel like our spiritual life is stuck. We feel like we have a faith, but we're not really living with faith. The analogy I gave on the very first week was, it's like being at Mount Everest and staying at base camp. You know, we're comfortable at the bottom, but we've never really climbed. It's not that we aren't at Everest, we just aren't climbing. And the encouragement has been to climb. And if you're here today and you'd say, hey, I'm not a follower of Jesus, I think today's going to be really helpful for you. And you've seen this. You've seen people who maybe would call themselves Christ followers, but they don't really seem that excited about it, or their life really doesn't seem that different than yours. And they might be what we've called stuck at base camp. So we've been saying, what does it mean to climb? So we've been talking about things like discomfort closes the distance between you and Jesus, and choosing things of discomfort. We've talked about probability, the practice of probability. Living like a move of God is not just possible, but it's probable. We've talked about positioning and the practice of positioning and putting ourselves in the place where God can work through us. Now today, I'm going to share with you the simplest way I know for you to grow from having a faith to living with faith. To me, it's the simplest lever to understand. It's the simplest lever to look at and go, I could pull that and this could happen. I know that I would go to living with faith. But here's the thing. It requires you to be brave. Okay, you want to know what it is? It's the practice of generosity. The practice of generosity moves you from having a faith to living with faith. Now, some of you right away are saying, he's going to talk about money. And, you know, Haley, who hosted here, was saying earlier, hey, we want Jeff to say something funny today. What's funnier than talking about money in church, right? So what we're going to do today is I want to talk about our finances. And here's the reason often we immediately kind of feel, a little bit nervous in a moment like this. It's because money is emotional. Money is emotional. It's as much a head thing, it's much a heart thing as it is a head thing. There is something emotional about money. And some of you know this because you're married. So you know what it's like to have a conversation about money. And for you, you go, yeah, actually, that's why my marriage ended, conversations about money. Or you have struggles. You don't like to talk about money. It's challenging to talk about money. It's because it's emotional. And money is personal. There aren't many friends you probably talk about your financial situation with. There's a vulnerability to it. There's an emotional side to it. And this is why I think that's so great. Because if something is connected to our heart in that way, where we feel that emotional, where we feel that vulnerable, man, something connected to our heart like that, don't we want to leverage something like that to move us from having a faith to living with faith? And so here's what I'm going to do today. We're going to do 3 things. Okay, the first is, just like the other weeks, I'm going to share with you an encounter that somebody had with Jesus, a conversation that he had with someone around their finances. Secondly, I want to talk about some of Jesus' basic teachings on finances and generosity. And then the third thing I'm going to do is we're going to get a chance to hear from my friends Rich and Christine around what they've learned around generosity. Now, before we jump, you ready for that? Because you don't seem ready. Are you ready? Okay, we're ready. You're like, woo, money, here we go, all right? So here's what you need to know before we jump into this account today between Jesus and this person. That Jesus is Jewish, and this is a Jewish culture, and this is in the New Testament. Well, prior to the New Testament, in the Old Testament, they had set up these laws. And one of the things that came out was this law around something called tithing. Came out at the time of Moses. This is what they practiced. Now, if you don't know what tithing is, it was the practice of giving 10% of your income back to God. That's what they practice. And so the idea was it was a gift to God to recognize him as the giver of all the gifts. It was like, okay, and this is really a Christian principle. Everything comes from God. We're just stewarding it for the time while we're here, but he is the giver of all the gifts. And so they would give back to him out of gratitude. They would give back to him because of his provision. They would give back to him this 10% to show their trust that he would provide. And in some cases, in some years, they would actually give an additional 10% or an extra offering on top of that. But the reason they did it was this. They said, man, I would rather live on 90% of my income with God than on 100% of my income without God. That was really the principle. Man, we want to be sure that we're giving back to God. And there is a season, actually you can read in the Old Testament, where they're not doing this, and God says to them, come on, you want to tithe because I'm going to provide for you. I want you to trust me. This is about trusting me. I want to provide for you. Be sure to bring the tithe. Be sure to bring the 10%. So this is the context that Jesus is talking to this guy in. And this is what happens. It says, as Jesus was starting out on his way to Jerusalem, a man comes running up to him. And he knelt down and he asked him, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What's he asking him? He's asking him, how good is good enough? Tell me what boxes I need to tick. I mean, this guy had serious control issues, right? It was like, okay, I think I've ticked all the boxes. Just let me know which box I want to tick. I need to tick. Which one am I missing? What do I need to inherit eternal life? This is a religious-based question. Tell me, as a religion, what boxes do I need to tick? What things do I need to do? Tell me, what's the thing I need to do? How good is good enough? And Jesus recognizes this. And he says to him, why do you call me good? Jesus asked. Only God is truly good. He says, but to answer your question, you know the commandments. You must not murder. You must not commit adultery. You must not steal. You must not testify falsely. You must not cheat anyone. Honor your father and mother. So he gives him some of the commandments that they have. All of them are relational ones. And he says, how about these? And the guy is excited. This is what he says. His teacher, the man replied, good news. I've obeyed all of these commands since I was young. He's excited, right? I've ticked all the boxes. I'm a good person. I do good things. Overall, I'm good. I mean, I do some bad things, but overall, I'm good. Or I grew up in a Christian home, and so I haven't done anything bad. Or at least none of the big things. And then Jesus looks at him. He says, looking at the man, Jesus felt genuine love for him. He sees this man striving to check all the boxes and to be good. And Jesus looks at him with love. And Jesus is about to say something challenging to him because he loves him. He says, man, I love you. You need to know there's still one thing you haven't done, he told him. And he's thinking, what is it? Tell me what it is. Just tell me what box I need to tick. And Jesus says, go and sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And then come and follow me. It says, at this the man's face fell, and he went away sad, for he had many possessions. What is this all about? Why is Jesus asking him to give all of his money to the poor? It's interesting. Jesus doesn't say, give all your money to me. He says, give all your money to the poor. Why would Jesus ask this man to do this? You know what he's really asking him? He's asking him, am I enough? Am I enough? Do you trust me? Do you trust me to give up control? Do you trust me to give up control of your finances completely? You know, it's easy for us to give up control of the things we can't control. We do this all the time. Pray that you would heal somebody, God. I pray that you would help me find a good parking spot. I pray that I would do well on my test. Like, these are things we're like, I can't control this. I better pray about it. But Jesus is saying, man, you are trying to control your life with your finances, and would you trust them to me? Am I enough for you? Are you satisfied in me? Am I enough? In a sense, what he's saying to him is this: you've been really successful in your business. You've done really, really well financially because I have blessed you, because I have given this to you, because I am the giver of gifts. You've done so well financially, but would you give it all back to me and go back to your original apartment where it was just you, and would I still be enough then? Is it me or is it just me? See, Jesus didn't ask for his money because Jesus doesn't need his money. He wants his heart satisfied in him. Jesus doesn't need your money. Jesus doesn't need my money. But Jesus wants our heart to be satisfied in him, for him to be all we need. Now, Jesus talks about money more than 25% of the time in Scripture. And this is a time when they didn't have Facebook ads, and they didn't have digital marketers, and they didn't have AI bots, and they didn't have algorithms, and they didn't have billboards coming at them every second of the day. But at the same time, Jesus continues to talk about money all the time. Why? Why do you think Jesus talked about money so much? I mean, they're dealing in like camels and sandals. I mean, they're not dealing with all the stuff we're dealing with. So why would Jesus talk about money so much? It's because that Jesus knew that money and consuming would be the number one competition for your heart. He knew that money, he knew that consumption would be the number one competition for your heart. You see, it's so easy for all of us to get caught up in what I call the consumption cycle. It's so easy for us to get caught up in all of that, and Jesus knew that. Let me explain to you what I mean by the consumption cycle. It goes like this. I got one, I bought one, I invested in one, I found one. Okay, so here's the way this goes. You're young, you got your first apartment, or maybe you're staying in your parents' basement, and you're like, man, I really need to get a couch. So you get one from your aunt that she had for 10 years, or you get one from your grandma, or you get one from one of your mom's friends, and it smells like cigarette smoke, but it'll probably come out, or you get one on Kijiji, or you get one on Facebook, or whatever it is, and you're like, man, I got one. Look at my couch. It's so amazing. Look at this couch. And you sit in it, and you go, oh, man, I know it's got like a few rips in it, but it's fine. And then you start to see some furniture ads come by your house. You think, man, it would be really nice to buy one. I mean, I got one, but what if I bought one? So you go, you know what, I'm going to buy something. So you go on Kijiji, and you end up going on Kijiji, you end up going to IKEA. You get that couch. You get that couch at IKEA. You get that at home. And you're like, man, look at my beautiful IKEA couch. It only took me 8 hours to put it together. And then what happens is 3 years later, it's got like snot stains from the kids and that coffee you spilled. And you're like, man, I need a new couch. But like, I'm not going to get an IKEA one. I'm going to invest in one. So you got one, you bought one. Now this one's for the long term. This one's for the long haul. And then you invest in that one. And then what ends up happening is you invest in it, then you have that couch, and you have it for a number of years. And then what happens is you go, man, we're empty nesters now, and it's probably time for us to redecorate. I'm going to get a new couch. And then you go researching on the internet. Because you don't want any couch, you want the couch. The best couch. The one you always wanted. And you go from I got one, to I bought one, to I invested one, and then I found one. We do this with cars. We do it with homes. Actually, when people get overextended on their homes, it's when they skip from I got one to I want my forever home like that. All of a sudden, they've taken on too much home. We do it with vehicles. We do it with clothes. We do it with all kinds of things. We get caught in the cycle. And you know what happens with all four of those couches? You know what they all have in common? they all end up in a landfill one day. All 4 of them. But we get caught up in the consumption cycle. The next snowmobile, the next ATV, the next truck, the next, I need another one and another one and another one. And the reason Jesus talks about money all the time is because Jesus knows that a consumption-based life will leave you consumed. It will eventually, over time, consume you quietly. Some of you, a consumption-based life, I know, is consuming your marriage right now. That as the 2 of you argue about money, why can't we get this? Why can't we get that? She wants this. I don't think we have the money. Why can't you make more? Why can't she make more? It's consuming your own marriage. The fact that you just can't get to the next got one, bought one, invest in one. And you want to get there so bad that your relationship is being eaten alive. And Jesus wants us to be free from the cycle of consumption. Jesus wants to be free from the cycle of consumption. That's what he wants for you, and that's what he wants for me. See, when Jesus talks to this gentleman, he's not saying it's wrong for him to have money. He's not saying it's wrong for him to have possessions. He's not saying it's wrong for him to be wealthy. What he's saying is, man, you are finding your heart satisfied in consumption and not in me. And that's what I want for you. I want a relationship with you. I don't want you to live that way. In Matthew, Jesus explains it this way, how to break the consumption cycle. He says, don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them and where thieves break in and steal them. What's he saying here? He's saying, resist the desire to acquire. Resist the desire to continue to get the next and the next and the next and the next. It's not about how much money you make. He's talking about how you steward it. Are you investing it in the right things? He says, if you want to invest in something, he says, store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. He's saying, choose to break the power of consumerism with the practice of generosity. Break the power of consumerism in your life by choosing to be generous. Whether you're a church person or not a church person, choose to break it in your life with the power of generosity. And listen, this isn't a message about give to Connexus. I mean, I love giving to Connexus. My friend Rich, you're going to hear from later, he calls it the mutual fund of goodness. There are a lot of good things happening that you can give to, but don't give to Connexus. Give to something else. Give to something else that God's doing. Give to something else in the kingdom. But man, break the power of consumption in your life with generosity. Choose to invest in a legacy of life change that echoes beyond you. And then Jesus says this. He says, here's how you do this. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. What's Jesus saying here? Let me put it real plainly. Your money is the steering wheel for your heart. And as you get in the car of finances, what is the route you're going to choose? Are you going to choose a route of consumption? Or are you going to steer your life towards the things that really make a difference, that really matter in eternity, that really impact lives? See, I think the mistake that the man makes when he talks to Jesus, this is the mistake that he makes. He thinks that a relationship with Jesus, or he would look at it as a religion, is just about sinning and not sinning. Tell me where I don't sin, and tell me where the line is, and I want to know. And he's missing out on the fact that following Jesus is so much more than sinning and not sinning. It's way more than that. Steve Cuss, who's a pastor, he says this, the miracle of salvation isn't that Jesus stops us from sinning or being tempted to sin. The miracle of salvation, it's that Jesus changes what our heart wants. And Jesus says to you, I don't want you to live a life where at the end of the day, it's just another cycle of consumption after another, after another, after another. prior to working here at Connexus, I was working in a very affluent community, and I was very caught up in the consumption cycle. There was always someone with a better car, and there was always somebody with a bigger house, and there was always somebody with a better countertop. It's a thing for me. And better this and better that. And it didn't matter how far you got. There was 100 people who had more than you had. And it was eating me up alive. I would go to people's houses and I would see this and I would see that and I want this and I want that. And it was quietly eating my soul. And we came here to Connexus. And I met people I met these people and I said, I want to be like these people. And Les and I would talk about them and say, there's something about these people that's just different. And you know what we found out they all had in common? They all were really generous financially. And we really, if I'm honest, were more tipping than we were tithing. And in 2008, some of you can remember the financial situation in 2008. It's a challenging one. We decided that we were going to give 10%. And I was like, where is this money going to come from? We had credit card debt. We'd made a poor decision there when we moved, and we went for it to see if God would provide. And it changed my life. I'm grateful to this church for a lot of things. But this is one of the things at the top of the list that it taught me about what it really means to be generous and what it really means to fight for a heart of generosity and what it really means to invest in things that matter. And my life was changed. What was it that I saw in those people? What was it that was different about them? I think actually in Matthew, Jesus goes on to explain more about it. He explains exactly what I saw. You see, in the Jewish culture, they saw your eyes as the windows to your soul. And so when it talks about light in your eyes, it talks about generosity. When it talks about darkness in your eyes, it's talking about selfishness or greed, even though we don't like that word. And this is what it says in Matthew. It says, your eye, when you choose, your treasure is where your heart is. Your money is the steering wheel for your life, Money is the steering wheel for your life. He says, your eye is like a lamp that provides light to your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. What does that mean? He's saying, man, when you choose to be generous, when you choose to put your finances into the things that make an eternal difference, you see the world in a totally different way. You see it as a place of abundance. You see it as a place of opportunity. You see it as a place of God working. It changes how you see things. And he says, but when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body is filled with darkness. He's talking about a lack of generosity here. And he warns, this is a stern warning, he says, and if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. If you think you're being generous and you really aren't, Jesus is warning, that's a dangerous thing. Because your vision is clouded. Generosity gives you the opportunity to see the world in a completely different way. But the choice not to be generous, a consumeristic-based life, man, you don't see the world in the way you could. See, consumerism slyly, and I use the word intentionally, slyly hollows you out with constant craving, hollows you out with comparison and competition and personal kingdom. But generosity allows you to see the world as a place of abundance. It allows you to see the place of spiritual opportunity. It allows you to see the world as a place of kingdom impact. It completely changes how you see things. And that's what Jesus wants for you. A life fully satisfied in him. A life where you're partnering with him, seeing a kingdom impact. Well, all those years ago when I was on this journey with Leslie of generosity and being inspired by those around us, friends of ours, Rich and Christine, were on a similar journey and a little bit ahead of us. And we were looking to them. And I said to Rich and Christine, do you think you'd share with our whole church about what you've learned about generosity? And they said that they would be willing to do that. And what I want you to do is just hear a little bit from them. Turn your eyes to the screen.
Well, I'm here with Rich and Christine Birch. And if you don't know Rich and Christine, they're good friends of mine. Rich was a part of the staff team that started Connexus, and Christine currently serves on staff with me. And I've learned so much from them in the area of generosity. And I thought, what a gift it would be for us to be able to hear from you and learn from you. So I just want to start with this question. You know, I've watched you grow in generosity. When did the switch flip for you? When did you kind of feel like, oh man, I think I really get this and I want to lean into this?
Well, you know, when Christine and I were first married, that was a few years ago.
Just a few.
You're starting out in marriage and you're setting all these patterns in life. You know, you're making all these decisions around kind of how you're going to live your life. Right. And although I always understood, or at that time understood about tithing, this idea of giving, I remember it was literally like one of our first paychecks. Christine was like, well, we have to tithe. And I was like, well, if I was honest, Jeff, what was inside of me was like, no, that's for like some other super spiritual people. That wasn't for us. Right. And Christine was like, no, we really need to do that, man. I am so thankful that started that really way back then, because then we've able to kind of build that rhythm in over all of these years, and it's kind of grown from there. But man, I'm so thankful for her poking that all those years ago.
Yeah, but you were in it with me, obviously.
Yeah,
and
totally.
It's been a great pattern to be a part of our marriage and our great rhythm. We really feel like, you know, in Matthew 6:21, it talks about where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And there's different ways to look at that, but the way we've kind of looked at it is as we've given to various organizations in our church over the years, we feel more endeared, like more connected emotionally to those organizations. You know, we have our Compassion Child in Guatemala and support a school there, and we ended up going on vacation there. Like that's the kind of thing that happens when you feel that way. And so that's how we feel about, you know, being able to tithe and be a part of the good things that are going on at the church. We feel connected to them, and it's really important to us that is a rhythm and a constant in our lives.
Creating patterns early on, and where your treasure is, there your heart's going to be also. And, you know, just really appreciate you guys sharing, because, you know, imagine we all got up here in front of everybody and talked about money. So this is a gift to all of us. So let's just talk about I want to talk a little bit about the early days of Connexus. You know, we're talking about being all in at the mission, in the mission of Connexus as part of this series. In those early days, you were here, I was here. What inspired you around the generosity of people in our very earliest days as we kind of launched and started to create this culture of generosity in our church?
Yeah, one of the things I love about our church, it was true back then and continues to be true today, is Connexus has always been, and we've used different language for this over the years, but always been about reaching the next generation, trying to reach those that are younger than us, and also about reaching people who aren't here. One of the things I love about the local church is it's the only organization in the world that exists for people that aren't here. And I was really inspired early on. There was a group of leaders that were, say, 10, 15, 20 years older than me at that point, that they were all in financially. And it was amazing to see, because they had, through the journey that they had been doing that for quite a while, and it was like they were ready to re-up again and do something. I found that really inspiring and hoped to be one of those people when I grow up someday, to be like, man, I want to be the person that's consistently saying I want to help reach new people and reach younger generations for sure.
Yeah, it's one thing to kind of up it. It's another thing, you know, one time. Yes. It's another thing to say, like, I'm going to re-up continually on the vision and mission. What about you, Christine?
Yeah, well, it was interesting in that season because he was on the team, so he had some insights that I didn't necessarily have, but he's telling me these stories about the generosity, in some cases about the size of the gifts, not the who, but the size of the gifts. And I remember thinking, man, like I want to be able to do that someday. Like I hope I can do that for the next generation. These are people at the time that they didn't have kids in the home maybe, but we did. And so they're doing that for our family. And so there was something there that you start to realize that these are not selfish gifts. Like they're not giving in a way that's going to benefit their family. I mean, it does because you're giving, and that is a good thing for a family to do. But it wasn't for their family directly. And yeah, I just remember thinking, someday that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I love that when it comes to generosity, the ability to inspire people. You know, when you're generous, it's contagious and it goes to the next person, and you can inspire more people towards generosity. Now, I've seen both of you look at, hey, what does it mean to actually practice this, and seen it grow your faith. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about what that's been like. What's the journey been like when it comes to financially practicing generosity and seeing yourself grow?
Okay. Yeah, I remember this conversation our group had a number of years ago. And it was a conversation about generosity, a conversation about giving, and there was pushback that we, on us having the conversation. And, the people were in our group were thinking like, this is a private conversation. This is something that people should be kind of talking to God about in their own kind of walk with him. And I actually felt at the time a little on the outs because I was like, no, I think we should be talking about this. And as awkward as that can be, I think that's something we need to push against. And, there's something that, like you said, we are inspiring others, and maybe that could be a part of our group conversations. But I think when we're talking about our faith, it should include talking about how we're kind of managing our finances.
Yeah, totally. Because it's I know for me in this whole area, as I journey with generosity and think about how do I grow, it's like not about the money and kind of about the money, right? Like it's ultimately about me choosing to live, or us choosing to live an other-centered life. It's about saying, hey, I want to orient my life. When I read Jesus, when I read the kind of life he wants us to lead, it's about orienting our lives around serving others. And what more practical way than to choose to take the money that I've made and to give it so other people can benefit. And to me, the deeper reality there is actually more about other-centeredness than the money. It's really, the money is a tool, but it's pushing at a deeper reality inside of me that I love. And I think that grows me, that really transforms me and helps remind me about the kind of life I should be living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we've all had experiences in developing countries, and often when you come home from experiences like that, you hear people when they'll say something like this. You've heard this before. They have so little, but they seem so happy. And I think there's something there. And this would be a continual kind of growth thing that I try to process often. I try to think, what would it mean to give so sacrificially that I had to rely on God more to meet needs?
Yeah, wow.
And so meet needs, we know he's going to meet needs, but like sometimes maybe the first thing is, what would it mean to give so sacrificially that you had to ask God if it's okay to deal with my wants?
Right.
Right. So I think that always is pushing, and I'm hopeful that we will continue to have that conversation over time.
I love the fact that you can take your finances and through generosity, use them as a tool for yourself to grow spiritually. And I do agree, it's such an important conversation to be having with other people, because I really think you sharpen each other, helps you grow in this area. Now, I would love to ask you guys about when to start. I think there are so many of us who are, many people are in different stages. Oh, we're a young family and we want to get a house one day, or I'm not married yet, or I'm older and I didn't do it and now maybe I don't want to go back. Like, am I going backwards now doing it? I don't know where to begin. What would you say to that?
That's a great question. We have gained so much through being generous. It has given way more to us than we've given away. That I would say, why wait? Like, why are you delaying? Like, now, this week would be a great week to start. This month, think about your next paycheck. Like, because and start where you are today. Like, go home and figure it out. Like, don't delay. It has been, for us, such an amazing tool that God's used in his hands to form us. I would plead to people, like, don't delay. Don't put it off. Don't wait for there's no magic moment coming where it's like, oh, you're going to have all this extra money. That just doesn't happen in life. Like, none of us are that doesn't happen to anyone in this room. That's not going to happen. So I would start now.
I think that's amazing. And when it comes to that investing, we've seen so many people learn that principle of, they give first, and then they save second, and then they live on the rest. That's really a real simple, intentional way to do it. Man, it's been such a gift to hear from both of you. Anything else you want to say to everybody that might be helpful?
I also think there's the benefit of when you are generous, when you give, there's a benefit of contentment, and also it's something that we can be striving for too. And so it's interesting. I find over time, I never thought it would be the case, but over time we ended up making more money, like as life went on.
Yes.
And while that is a trend, if our giving doesn't match with that, like it's really easy to allow our lifestyle to kind of be on the increase at the same time. But what if we, as life carries on, as there's a little bit more margin, what if instead of increasing our lifestyle, we actually increased our generosity and exercised contentment in that lifestyle that we currently have? I just think there's so much there to be able to enjoy the mutual fund of goodness and all of those benefits in life.
Right, and there's an element there of peace that comes when just hearing what you're saying, that the choice of like, it's enough. Generosity is what it's about. And I think without thinking that through, the bar of enough just keeps moving. That makes a lot of sense to me. Well, it's been such a privilege to learn from the both of you. Can we put our hands together and thank Rich and Christine?
Isn't that great? It's such a privilege to share with you the kind of conversations that I've had with Rich and Christine. And here's my encouragement to you. Choose to break the power of consumerism with the practice of generosity. In Matthew, Jesus goes on to say, he says, no one can serve two masters, for you're going to hate one and you're going to love the other. You're going to be devoted to one and you're going to despise the other. You can't serve God and be enslaved to money. You're going to choose what's in charge. That's what he's saying. You choose what's in charge. Is he in charge? Or at the end of the day, is consumerism in charge? And I would much rather see you experience the Jesus who looked on that man with love, genuine love, than to give in to the monster of consumerism and the cycle that goes over again and again and again. Generosity, it grows your trust, it grows your gratitude, it grows God's kingdom. And I've been thinking about this series a lot. And hey, if you're here and you would say, I'm not sure I believe in God, you can try it too. Nothing's stopping you. And Jesus doesn't need your money. He wants your heart. Choose to be generous somewhere. And I've been thinking about this week, over the last few weeks. And one of the things I've been thinking about, what it's going to be like in heaven one day. And what it's going to be like to worship God with the kids from Guatemala that we've sponsored through Compassion. And what that's going to be like. And what's it going to be like to worship God with many of you who've come to Jesus here? And what's it going to be like to stand together and worship him? And to meet people who maybe we've never met, who we've invested financially in something, and we've been generous, and their lives have been changed, and they're worshiping with us, and we're all worshiping together. And I think about that, what that will be like. And you know what I think about? I think about the fact that I won't be thinking about the fact that I upgraded my couch. And I won't be thinking about the size of house I had. Because the house I have there will be much better. In a place where moth and rust and robbery doesn't destroy. A place where lives are changed. And I don't say that to manipulate you, but I do say it to inspire you. To inspire you not to just have a faith, but live with faith. Because I believe that's what Jesus wants for you. He doesn't want you to be in the consumer cycle. He wants you to see the world the way he sees it. Full of abundance, full of opportunity, full of opportunities to both make money and be generous with money so that lives can be changed. So this week, if you're here today and you're thinking, where do I start? If you aren't tithing, I would say start tithing. It could be a big jump for you, but it was for us in 2008. But we've been able to do that and then move forward from there and look at more opportunities to be generous. And if you're here today and you say, well, I am tithing, I would say to you, no matter your income, Are you generous in a way to the things of God that it shows him that it's enough, that he's enough to satisfy? Are you generous in a way that shows him, man, I'm satisfied in you. I trust you to provide. I want to show you that I'm not relying on my financial situation, but I'm fully satisfied in you, and I want to invest in the things you're doing. Is that the way that you're choosing to be generous? Let me pray for us. God, we come to you today recognizing that you're a good God, a God who provides all things for us and doesn't talk to us about generosity because you need the money, but talks about generosity because you want our hearts, that you want to break the power of consumerism in our lives. And I pray that your Holy Spirit would be giving us courage, that you would make it clear what our next steps are, and that then you would encourage us to do them. Fill us with courage, that we might look back on our lives and say, man, I am so glad that I chose generosity and then in turn chose to see the world that you see it. One of abundance, one of opportunity, one of lives changed, and building a legacy that really matters. And I pray this in your name.